All right, thank you for your patience, everyone. I'm sorry that we had a technical delay. So this is our Open Finance Committee meeting, the first one of this spring. The purpose of this meeting is to basically open up the usual Finance Committee meeting that the Board of Education members have so that members of the public can observe it. And it also provides other board members who are not on the Finance Committee the opportunity to ask questions of members who are on the Finance Committee. The reason we're having this meeting tonight is that the governor released his state aid figures, I guess about 2 weeks ago on March 7th or so, and we're required to submit a preliminary budget to the County Superintendent of Schools by March 20th. So I'll go through what the Finance Committee has discussed and talk about some of the major elements and components of the budget as we enter 2019-2020. So the headlines here for this budget are number one, enrollment, which is declining gradually, and I will speak more about that in a minute. Our health insurance increase for next year is at 0%. So this is the first year we've had a flat health insurance change year over year in quite some time, and I'll speak a little bit about that. The tax levy increase is a hard 2% this year. The board cannot entertain going above the 2% mark, which is something different, I believe, than every year since 2011 when the latest law was put into effect. And then again this year, we will receive a state aid increase, which is the result of legislation signed into law by Governor Murphy last summer, and I will get into that. So starting with enrollment, some of you probably were here on October 15th when our demographer came to give a presentation, and what he essentially said was that birth rates are way down in the Chathams. However, our enrollment is not declining at the rate that the birth rates would suggest because we have a number of move-ins every year in the other grade levels that are not as affected by birth rate. So enrollment has plateaued. It hit its peak in 2016-17, and now it is gradually coming down. And that's important in the context of the budget discussions because the primary cost driver for everything in the district has to do with enrollment and the number of students we have. So health insurance wise, you might recall that in January of 2018, the Board of Education authorized the school district to enter into something called the School's Health Insurance Fund. The School's Health Insurance Fund is a collection of school districts, most of which are in South or Southern New Jersey, but some of them are in northern parts of the state. And it's a publicly held entity. The goal of the SHIF is to kind of pool resources and use leverage to try to negotiate better health insurance rates. So we entered in 2018. We had a slight increase in the middle of the year, which we deferred into this budget year in part. But now for the coming fiscal year, we are at a 0% increase. So that brings us then to the tax levy. Most of our school district's budget derives from the local tax levy, even with additional state aid, as I'll get to in a second. State aid and federal aid constitutes a very small portion of our overall budget. Upwards of 90% of the budget comes from the local tax levy. So boards of education are permitted to raise the tax levy a maximum of 2% on an annual basis. But the caveat to that is that if a board qualifies for certain waivers, such as enrollment growth or health insurance costs that are equivalent to the amount that the state employees health benefits plan increases, then the board can qualify for those waivers, and essentially it's an expansion of the taxing authority of the board. This year, though, the board doesn't qualify for any of those waivers, so the 2% remains in effect. And for the first time, I believe since the law came into play, there's no banked cap. So there's no banked cap, there are no waivers, which means that the tax levy increase is 2% or less. state aid, and I could get way into this. I tried not to and just went with kind of the basics here. S2 was the law, authored mainly by Steve Sweeney, that the governor signed into effect during the budget reconciliation process last summer. S2 recommits New Jersey to SIFRA, which is the School Funding Reform Act. It's the formula used to determine how districts receive state aid. And it, in addition to recommitting to SIFRA, it redistributes aid that was called adjustment aid. And I won't get into the definition of adjustment aid, but we never received any of it. And what's happening now is that a third of the school districts in New Jersey are losing money, and 2/3 of the school districts are gaining money. We're in the 2/3 that are receiving more money because of this law. Even with the additional aid, the state's own calculations that they provided to us on March 7th show that we're getting about 60% of the funding that the formula calls for. So we're underfunded, but we're catching back up. And we should, if all things remain the same, see increases in state aid every year for the next 5 years. This is our state aid for the past 15 years, just to kind of give you some context. This is state aid per pupil. So the amount of money per pupil that, that New Jersey has kind of funded us. This was the financial crisis, Governor Christie's first year in office, 2010-11. That's when we were hit with the starkest aid reductions. And if you just superimpose our enrollment line, which was from an earlier slide, with state aid, and this is actual state aid dollars. When SIFRA was introduced, it was introduced only run 1 year, not run fully, but run. We were getting about $3 million in 2009, 2010. So exactly a decade ago, we were at about the $3 million mark. And fast forward a decade, we just got back to we will just get back to the $3 million mark with the state aid increase that we're about to receive this coming budget year. So in terms of the Finance Committee's discussions and the board discussions, the local tax levy for this current budget year is about $64 million. The maximum increase that the board can entertain is 2%. That takes you to that amount in the tax levy. And then the two areas of revenue growth, if you will, main areas of revenue growth would be the state aid increase that I just spoke about, and what we're budgeting for full day kindergarten tuition. We had the kindergarten lottery drawing a couple of weeks ago. That's going well. We're making our way through the list and getting the deposits, and we're budgeting that much money in kindergarten tuition. So that's the revenue side of it. On the expenses side, we have a 2% number for many of our costs, like transportation and energy and salaries. We have some items that are increasing at a clip greater than 2%. And those include transportation costs for athletic contests, because we have been unable this year to secure busing all the time. And of course, we don't always we never set the rates for out-of-district schools, private schools. And then we have capital projects and equipment investments that also kind of fall apart from any 2% lock-in number. Those are investments that we review from a facilities and finance perspective and try to keep a pace from year to year. Those are the major expenses. This is a little bit hard to read, but I'll just walk you through it. These are the capital projects that that the Finance Committee so far has recommended including in the budget. So there is replacement of equipment in terms of technology. That includes interactive whiteboards primarily, and a few cameras that we're missing in certain spots. Some construction projects, the largest one being roof replacement at CMS, and roof replacement at some of our other schools, and also the demolition of the former Special Services building, which is still sitting on Lafayette Avenue. We have debt service, and if you kind of go towards the bottom, then we plan on, at this point, making a withdrawal from capital reserve of about $1 million, and then including in the budget as part of the budget, the operating budget, the remainder, $300,000, to get to the total amount for these projects. The Finance Committee discussed for some length of time a couple of other items that didn't make it into this list. You can see this is mostly infrastructure. The two items that are at the top of the list that can't fit into this budget, at least in a 2% scenario, is the replacement of the track at Cougar Field, which is about 12 or 13 years old, and security vestibules or secure vestibules at each of the school entrances. So those are kind of the double doors where you have two sets of locking doors. So if someone enters the first set of doors, they have to wait and they can't proceed directly into the building. They've been on the list for a few years now, but we haven't, we've made other investments instead. So the Finance Committee also discussed for some time how to go about accomplishing the $1 million+ of investments in these two items. And this is still an open discussion among the Finance Committee, but the options really are, to ignore it completely, indefinitely, to look at a future budget or multiple budgets to try to get them done, to look at a second question, or to look at a small bond proposal / referendum. Other items in terms of needs that have been articulated by principals, supervisors, and others is an additional psychologist at CMS. You will recall we added a psychologist to Chatham High School last year at this time, so that we have an additional psychologist as a member of our child study team. We believe this is important to do at Chatham Middle School next year. An ASL teacher, you'll also recall that we added ASL to Chatham High School's program last year. We originally were aiming for 2 teachers, one at the middle school, one at the high school. We were only able to include one at the high school last year, so this would be a second one at the middle school to enable this program to operate like our other languages. We have some unfilled Chinese and Spanish sections at CHS and CMS now, so we have teachers that are teaching extra classes, and in one case I think we have 27 students in a Chinese class. So those are ongoing needs. And then other items that will be familiar to the members of the Board of Education. We talk every year about an athletic trainer at CHS. Our goal is to have additional Class 3 officers in the district, not just 2. The principals have indicated a need for instructional technology support for their staff. We've talked about HIB-related issues, social and emotional well-being, health and physical education. Last year, we eliminated a supervisor in health and physical education in order to add a supervisor in special services. And then, of course, we have a number of extracurricular activities that have requested funding, most notably sailing, paddle, and girls hockey, ice hockey. So the Finance Committee discussed and recommends the following, and this would be the additional state aid. So going back to the revenue numbers, the additional state aid would go to these 4 items: the psychologist at CMS, which we think is critical; the ASL teacher at CMS, which we also think is critical; filling up the staffing that has gone unfilled to this point in the year; and then allocating money to both sailing and paddle. $15,000 each. The priorities that are not yet budgeted for are the rest of the items that are on the list. The Finance Committee discussed the fact that we have not accounted to this point, and many budget years we don't ever take into consideration the money that we might save in retirements when a veteran staff member retires and we replace them with a less veteran staff member. We have not accounted for any of that savings that could result from those retirements. And if we get closer to the end of the year and the Finance Committee and the administration feel that we should move forward with one or more items on the list, we would probably turn to that those savings from those dollars to try to accomplish one or more of these items. This one's a little bit hard to see also, but we will have this up on our website. So this first column is last year. And usually, if you've been to these meetings, we have like 6 columns because the Board of Education is trying to determine should it, if the maximum taxing authority is, I think last year it was 3.6, if my memory serves, the board considers, well, what would happen if we went to 3.48, which is where the board ended up last year? What would happen if we were only at 3? What would happen if we were only at 2? This year, there is no there's no set of columns to choose from. This year, the budget is locked at 2% in terms of the tax levy increase. The board does not have the option to consider anything above 2%. It could cut and consider something less than 2%, but 2% is the only number that the board is really going to go off of. This is also a little bit difficult to read, but the blue here is salaries. The red is health benefits. So 75% of the district budget is devoted to salaries and benefits. The green is, can't read it, Pete, what is that, out of district tuition maybe? So the green and purple I know are transportation and out of district tuition. And then you can see there are slivers of other items. In this blue, which we have labeled other, we've got instructional supplies, technology supplies, etc. But it just gives you maintenance work. It gives you a feel for where the expenditures fall. In terms of the overall tax impact, again at 2%, 2% would result in an increase of every $100,000 of assessed value of about $33 a year in the borough and about $20 a year in the township per $100,000, 2%. We always do at least a couple of comparisons with other school districts. So this chart is got 2 numbers in it. I know it's hard to see, but it's the school tax in each one of these communities. So just the straight school tax, how much is collected in the school tax, and then the number of pupils according to the New Jersey Department of Education Enrollment Report from 2017, so it lags a year and a half or so, and then just divide those numbers and you get a per pupil tax levy. So you can see that we compare fairly favorably, depending on your perspective, of course, to communities that we often compare ourselves to from an academic point of view. And then, as I said, there are really two important deadlines. The first is March 20th, which is when the board has to adopt a preliminary budget. That's not set in stone. It can change. The board can alter it, but we have to approve that tonight so that we can submit it to the county. And then the board is required to hold a final adoption and public hearing on the budget between these 2 dates and our Board of Education meeting, our second Board of Education meeting in April, falls right in the middle. So that is when we will have the final budget hearing and adoption. So that is it from the summary of where we are now. And of course the board can discuss, ask questions of Peter, talk things through, etc.
The other one note in the last slide, in addition to the, tonight approving the preliminary budget and having the public hearing April 29th, once we get approval from the county, we will publish the advertised budget in the newspaper, and it would also, once it's done, it will be added to the website. Just as Dr. LaSousa said, tonight's presentation will most likely hit the website sometime tomorrow, or worst case Wednesday morning. So.
For the presentation. Appreciate that. I just want to give the members of the Finance Committee an opportunity to speak if they so choose prior to opening up to questions. Sal, did you want to add anything from a Finance Committee or any of your?
Hopefully this is not just for my benefit, but it certainly is for my benefit. Although no one's trying to spend more of the taxpayers' money, when we see ourselves so low on the list, and obviously there's no opportunity to catch up if we're just going to, if we're constrained by 2%. If there are needs that you felt were pressing, like some of these other wish list items that have been prioritized lower, how would we catch up hypothetically? How could we catch up? And that's not a target. It's not that we're trying to, you know, we're trying to spend more, but at the same time, we're trying to make sure that we're providing the best education we can for the kids in our district.
So that last chart showed per pupil spending, basically, per pupil tax levy. There are 3 ways to catch up. The first is to have your enrollment fall so that your budget amount remains constant or grows slightly and your enrollment declines, so that therefore the the numerator becomes, it's the numerator, right? Is it the numerator becomes smaller and the denominator grows? Or the board, when it has waivers available or banked cap, can use as much of it as possible, which it kind of happened last year. 3.48 last year was much greater than 2.0. Or the board can consider a second question. And a second question would, one type of second question is to permanently raise the tax levy for a specific purpose. We have never done that.
Second question in terms of a specific capital expenditure, but you can actually do a second question down the road for the purpose of in hiring more teachers, for example?
Yes. So there are basically 2 kinds. I'd say there's usually some kind of bond proposal, which is like a referendum where the board is going out to borrow money to accomplish capital improvements. That's the most common type of referendum. But you are permitted to ask a second budgetary question, and you can form that question to either be a one-time raising of funds that would hit the tax levy once but then disappear, or it can be a permanent increase of the tax levy. So if you did staff, for example, that would be a permanent increase because it's a recurring cost for the foreseeable future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did anybody else from the Finance Committee want to add anything prior to the rest of the board? You're not. Oh, you are on
I
Finance.
just want to interject a little more information to respond to Mr. Arnick, is that if the board chose to do a second question, for example, a staff member, if the question passes at the November election, the district gets the money as of January and then can add the staff member to the existing budget halfway through the year.
Okay.
If the question fails, the district cannot do any adjustment or hiring of that specific staff member until the following budget year when they find other funds.
It has to be something you can live without.
Correct.
So even if there's breakage, you can't decide, if you do a second question.
You can't apply it to that particular staff member.
Okay.
So if you can't live without it, and the only 2 things a district cannot by law live without are a superintendent and a business administrator. I was going to say you guys are optional. But if it's a trainer, for example, you know, we'd love to have another trainer. Rich Connors has been asking for a trainer in his best Jersey City
Since I've
accent,
been on the board.
layered on with his summa cum laude law degree for as long as I can remember. Trainer has been on that list at least a decade. We could add it as a second question, and if it doesn't pass, we don't have to fund it. You know, we can't fund it until the following budget. So it's got to be something you can live without. A psychologist, for example, I personally wouldn't classify that as something you can live without. If the staff is saying they have a need for a psychologist, that, you know, is something I would think that we can't really live without because we're trying to put a focus and a laser focus on mental health. So that's not really optional if the staff is saying this is our top priority.
I don't think the athletic trainer is optional either, with
I-
1,200 students and 1 athletic trainer.
Yeah,
It's
I don't
ridiculous.
disagree with you. That's the risk, though. If you run that type of question, you can't
Right.
fund it until the following
If
budget.
the money magically appears somewhere, we can't use it.
Correct. Right. You can't use breakage. I'm sorry, Michelle, you had a comment?
I'm not on finance, so did everyone on finance get a chance to speak?
Seems so.
Oh, okay, I'm not on finance. I first of all want to thank the people on finance who are here for putting sailing and paddle and prioritizing and finding funds for those programs. The other thing, just to dovetail on what Ann said, if we can find a way, that I feel like since I've been on the board, that trainer has bubbled up and just pushed back down, bubbled up, pushed back down every budget cycle. And I think we are encouraging our kids to participate, whether in, in this case, it's athletics. And we want to keep them safe. We want to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our athletes in every single sport that's being offered here, and we're adding more sports as we go. So if it were to come around and funds became available, whether through breakage, I really hope that we can make that a priority soon.
If we were to have a second question, is there a time frame where we have to come up with it and propose it? Like, what are the deadlines for that? And just let you know, people get hurt in drama too.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to throw it out there.
and-
There's a lot of heavy lifting there.
And dance.
I know, but they would help with that too.
Hey, my kid gets hurt on the chess club, so.
There you go. That's what I'm saying.
That's a great question, Mary. So my understanding, and we would probably need more, if the board was so inclined to do this, we would make sure that we're all the, T's are crossed and I's are dotted. But my understanding is for a second question budget proposal, November is the date that you have to present that, and that proposal has to be submitted with your final budget. So let's just say hypothetically, if you wanted to put a second question together with an athletic trainer and, two athletic trainers and a counselor, let's just hypothetically, we'd have to inform the county of that with our budget proposal, and it would have to go through all these same deadlines that we have now, and then it would appear on the ballot in November. For a referendum, a question about the track and the vestibules or anything else, there are 5 dates over the course of the year. Then you can select any one of them, and then there's a deadline for each. So last Tuesday there was a date in March. A number of districts proposed to their voters different spending questions. The first one is in every year. It's in September. There's another one in November, of course, December, March, and I forget, maybe one in June or January or something like that. But it's more flexible and more open.
And that's the referendum question. So just because we changed the date that we vote for the budget, a referendum question we can put out to the voters on one of those 5 dates during the year?
Anybody can do that, even if regardless of when their budget, process is, whether it's November or April, those 5 dates are all the same for
Okay.
for referendum proposals.
Okay, but the second question can only go on the November
If
ballot?
it's a second budget question, has to go on the November ballot.
Great, thanks for that.
Mike, I just wanted to clarify a number that you had on for sailing and paddle. You had said I think the total was 30, but it was my impression that it was 30 per season, and sailing has 2 seasons. So is it? So 15, 15, 15 is, I went to Susquehanna, so by that my math is 45,000. Did you have 30 on there, or?
Yes, in the current budget for 18-19, sailing received 15,000 of funding.
Okay.
We got some partial funding, so their funding is being increased by 15,000 to a total of 30, which will help them for both season. And paddle in 19-20 will receive $15,000 towards of funding.
Don't you have to count the total then? Sailing is getting 30,000.
They already get 15.
Yeah, but they already,
We still have
Only
to,
an additional 15,
so we're only talking about the delta?
yes.
Okay.
correct.
The slide that Dr. LaSousa showed the use of the 310,000 of state aid. So we're
Okay.
allocating additional funds to
Additional-
sailing and then funds to paddle.
Okay, got it. And then women's hockey, Sal was discussed. It's just still in the works and in the hopper. For those that don't know, our women's hockey team won the state championship this year, which was phenomenal. They were here last week. I was going to say bragging, but it's not bragging if you can do it, and they did it. In fact, several freshmen spoke, and it was really amazing to hear them talk about their season. But so it did come up, Sal, but it's still, my understanding, I'm not on finance, so I'm going to have to ask. It's still in the works. It's still a little bit early, and we're going to keep an eye on that.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Any additional questions on finance? So if we want to do a second question, sorry, Mary, looping back to your point, we have to button that up by essentially April 29th. Is that feasible? Given it's March?
It would need to be buttoned up before April, because typically what would happen is the second question would get presented with the budget that's going to the county on Wednesday, March 20th. Obviously, the board reserves the right to make changes at the public hearing. If we were going to do something as extensive as a second question, I would like to be able to get it to the county prior to April 29th and talk to them to the procedure on that. So if you pressed me for a date right now, I would say the board should have the idea of that maybe by April 15th, so we can get it to the county so they can start their review process, since they review, not just rubber stamp.
I'll just say, although I'm not on finance, I did attend the finance meeting for people who weren't there. Weren't able to attend. We did talk about the referendum and the second question. We just felt like with the referendum, from the last referendum not having been completed yet, that we felt that the appetite might not be there from the public to quite embrace yet another referendum. So I just wanted to throw that out there as an opinion that had been expressed.
Although that's just a function of construction.
Be that as it may, we still have the school, the middle school still isn't done yet. We haven't, finalized all of that yet. So the finance committee wanted to be sensitive to the fact that it hadn't been
Understood.
dispersed.
But, there was no logistical way to do both auditoriums simultaneously.
Granted, I'm just stating that
All right.
it is still not completed, and so.
Well,
Okay.
I think when it just came up, and I was at that meeting as well, and I'm not on finance either, but I just think it was just a matter of optics. Just, you can't, we were just saying, if we need to, we will. If we can avoid it, maybe we could, if we can hold off a little bit, just because we're just breaking ground at the middle school. Yes, you can't do both at the same time, but I think that was just something that came up. It was not, if something has to happen, then it has to happen.
Right.
That's all.
Noted.
Yeah, it wasn't.
I'm still processing the difference between, the referendum would be we'd issue debt.
Yes.
And if we do a second question, were we allowed to raise more funds via taxing authority?
Yes.
So we
Yes.
would go like to 2.2% or something like that? Is that what that second question would mean?
Correct.
So that second question would be our ability to raise above the state mandated cap. And we have the ability as a board and a school district to do that
Yes.
by asking our constituents.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And a referendum's a loan.
And,
I mean, it's just a straight up loan that we have, that adds to our debt service.
Which we get some reimbursement for.
Yes,
The
we
debt
actually
service.
can get state.
We'd probably qualify for roughly 30% of the cost being paid by the state
Second question,
we'd have to pay all of it. A bonding proposal related to school construction.
Oh, but not staffing.
No, not staff.
Okay.
Joe, I want to make one more comment.
Sure.
Regarding the student enrollment apparently peaking and on decline the last 2 years or so, I'm cautious about projecting, the declines that everyone's been projecting for 10 years, especially considering the construction projects that are being proposed in the borough and the township. And even though the builders of these projects anticipate that they're not going to be jam-packed with school kids, I think it's our experience that may not necessarily be, empty nesters might not be moving there. They might.
Right.
So that's.
I agree. I'm skeptical as well. Our demographer said families don't want to live near the train station. I like, well, in the borough they pay more for it. So it just doesn't apply. That normal paradigm doesn't necessarily apply to Chatham, but it's a good point. There's a tremendous amount of redevelopment and development, and
That we have to keep our eye on.
we have to keep our eye on. The township is still working on their affordable housing numbers. The borough has, settled with some of their numbers. There's also additional redevelopment on River Road that the borough is talking about from the corner of Watchung into about Crown Oil. There's a fairly large plot there that a developer has expressed interest in developing, and they're coming up with, 2 stories, 4 stories, 6 stories, and there's some mathematics, and it's all on the borough's website that, the higher the stories, the more, the number of school-age students is greater, so it's interesting, some of the mathematics and the hypothesis that they apply to it based on stories. But that's true. I don't know that our enrollment is going to tank, continue to go down. Does everybody have a thought on the athletic trainer? I mean, to instruct the finance committee to come up with a way to fund that, either by a second question or breakage. It was something that we'd have to do sooner rather than later if it's going to be a second question. you know, we have about a month at most to get that together. Robotics.
I think this trainer needs to be a priority.
Okay.
When we're pushing for mental health, one key aspect of keeping our kids away from unhealthy habits and activities is to keep them busy with extracurricular activities like robotics and certainly like athletics and drama. And you can't do that safely without another trainer.
I support another trainer no matter how you can do it, whether it's through breakage or if we have to go out. But if we do go out, I want this need to be, it could appear to be not a necessity. And so I think we would have to really articulate what the role of our trainer currently is and the number of students that are under that umbrella currently and how an additional trainer would help with this health and well-being and safety of our students.
Mary Ann Lotter, are you okay? Or unknown?
I would have to do a little more research before I
Okay.
came up with an opinion.
Okay.
I guess I'd like, yeah, if,
Well, they
Isn't
recommend.
Every
the
student in
breakage,
the high
right, the
school
breakage.
underneath that umbrella, they all have
Oh,
to
yeah.
take gym.
Yeah.
So whether you play in sport or not,
Yeah.
everybody is, the athletic trainer is watching over every student at the high school. And one trainer for 1,200 kids is not enough.
Yeah, I mean, kids are down having contests at various fields, and the trainer cannot be two places at once. And we try and hire per diem or, you know, trainers, but even that sometimes is not enough. And to get from Cooper
necessarily
Field down to
financially.
the middle school, you know, if you have a torn ACL, it's certainly not ideal.
But doesn't the NJSIAA require us to have a doctor on premise at games?
No.
No.
I wish.
I thought they did.
I think only football.
Only
Yeah.
football?
I
Oh,
bu-
okay.
I have to check on that, but we certainly don't have a doctor on premise at every
Oh, okay.
contest.
Do you count?
Definitely not.
Not that kind of doctor.
That's-
They did.
So is everybody okay with asking the Finance Committee, who happens to be these four seats, going back and maybe making a recommendation as to how we can make that happen, or how you suggest we move forward to make that happen, either second question, referendum, or breakage? If
Finance Committee will consult and give it a priority, and we'll report back.
Fantastic. Does anybody else have any questions? As Mike said, there's not a ton of options. We don't have those 6 columns to debate what can we live without. The 2% is paying 75% of the budget goes to salary and benefits. There's just, you know, it's not like we're pulling off a wish list. There's just nothing left. Just paying.
Make one more comment?
Absolutely.
And this is more for the benefit of live stream, but often I hear from neighbors, et cetera, gosh darn, in Chatham you have so many $800,000, $900,000, $1 million starter homes, if you can believe that, which is a credit to the school system, that are being bought up. They contribute $14,000, $15,000, $13,000 a year in property taxes to the town, and they get replaced by $2.5 million homes with $30,000 to $40,000 property taxes to the town. Why doesn't the school district not benefit from those increased tax collections that the town is getting?
Because the way the law works in New Jersey is that the board's taxing authority is based on the prior year tax levy and nothing else. So 2% is laid over whatever the tax levy was the previous year, in our case $64 million. It doesn't matter if the value of property in the two towns goes from $6 billion to $6.5 billion. It doesn't matter if Amazon tells Queens to shove off and they come to Chatham and we are awash in tax revenue. Our number still remains 2% on top of $64 million. It doesn't matter if Amazon is in town and builds a headquarters.
Funds the town.
Has zero impact on the total revenue that that the Board of Education is authorized to collect. The Board of Education is authorized to collect 2% beyond the $64 million and nothing more. And it also means the Board of Education is authorized to collect the 2% on top of $64 million, even if there's a depression or recession and the value of property collapses. So the board is locked in at the local tax levy from the prior year, no matter what the other conditions are in the town.
And we've been through the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, 2010, where the economy went in the hole, and we had our state aid cut to draconian levels. And still, property taxes in this town fell realtor
Little.
a little,
If
very
any.
little. Okay. So I guess the point is, I wish there was some way to we could make our legislators, well, I'll keep quiet.
But Sally, I mean, your point is well taken, but I want to add to it. Not only do we not see any of those ratables, if you take houses down, a couple of houses down, and put up 4, and that happens on multiple lots, or you build a 4-story low-rise or medium-rise, they call that. The town doesn't have to put in new sewers. They don't have to hire a new police officer. They're just ratables. Yet the students coming, so there's almost an inverse relationship for the school district. We're getting more bodies and no more dollars.
And let me tie that in, which makes it, so I'm very happy. Well, I'm not very happy. I wish there were never a need for Class 3 officers. But from the get-go, it kind of rubbed me wrong that the Board of Education was paying for those out of its budget, and the towns
Said no.
the towns said no. So the towns had all these increased ratables. They had the ability to pay for these things, which are relatively minor in the scheme of things, and in the scheme of the town's collective budgets. But we're only we're constrained. We can grow a maximum of 2% here, and we have to take a certain portion of those funds, and we're paying for Class 3 officers.
$50,000.
And that's the point I just wanted to make, and it's out there, and I'll keep
Yeah,
quiet.
$50,000 each. But it was a priority, another layer of security. So we've allocated the funds. We did ask the township and the borough. They said it's not in their budget. We met with them, not in their budget. We submitted in writing a few times, not in their budget. They had to approve it, though, which is still not approved in the borough. Township has since approved the position. The borough is still working on it. They haven't done it yet. But from a funding perspective, they said no.
But, if they say no, we still are doing it. So,
Yes,
we
but-
made that commitment, and
Yes.
we voted to approve those
That's
funds, and-
$50,000 less dollars, though,
I
that can
agree.
go to the
I
athletic
agree.
trainer.
I agree. I have a question, and I came in late, so I don't know if this slide was up, but when looking at the preliminary budget, one of the items after summer instruction, we have it in the agenda. I just had a question about charter school expense. Can you just, I know I should know this.
Out
and
of district placement, you mean?
No, there is,
No.
right now in the,
I know I should know this.
approximately in August, a family moved into the district, and 2 of their students go to a charter school in Newark.
Okay.
We are working where preliminary, they may be going to Lafayette next year, but we're not 100% sure. But due to state requirements for the fact that they're currently there, the state mandates that amount gets put into the 19-20 budget. So if they come into district, that's expense that I save.
Is that the first time that's been on our budget, a charter school?
That is the first time we've had a charter school, I believe, in 5 to 7 years. We had 1 student going to a charter school about 5 years ago.
Okay. Any?
One of the things that really struck me was that we had a 0% increase in our healthcare this year, which is tremendous with the move to the shift. What is our level of confidence that that is going to be minimal next year or not? Did I say that question right? But I mean, we're
Yes.
at 0 now. but-
I'd like to follow on Ms. Weber's comment that we're just sending the doctor out to all of the staff members. No, but from working with our insurance broker, the average health insurance increase for the SHIF is approximately between 2 and 4%. This year, the powers that be at the SHIF were able to renegotiate some different rates on the medical and prescription, where they were able to keep flat. So that's why we're benefiting from a 0 increase. I would be ecstatic next year if we were anywhere 5% or less. I'm presuming that, hopefully we will stay in the low single digits. I don't think we'll have zeros going forward, although I would be ecstatic if we do.
You and I both.
else, Mary?
No. So that's something that we wouldn't account for. I mean, how, I guess one of the things I'm not sure of, how do we account for that huge increase next year? Like, how do we anticipate or prepare for that as a district? Because that's a big chunk. That's a big hit.
In prior years, Mary, before you joined the board,
Yeah.
the district was getting increases anywhere between 10 and 15%.
Yeah.
And there is not really a way to prepare for it. The one thing that when the district's health benefit increase goes above the 2%, depending on what the increase is for the school's employee health benefit plan, which is the one moderated by the state, they allow you the waiver up to that number that the state puts out. So you do get some of the extra funding above 2% in the ability to pass it on to the taxpayers in a waiver, which is part of what accounted for having the ability to go to 3.48 last year.
Right.
So there is always some ability to have a waiver. Anything, if our increase is above the state average, the district has to tighten the belt and find ways to do it. It's not easy to say. Like this year, we had the ability to replace aging equipment with the interactive display boards. We had ability to do a little more capital work than we could fund from just doing capital from the withdrawal from capital reserve. If we had a larger health increase, those things wouldn't happen. Usually in the past, our spending is limited to the amount of the withdrawal. This year, we're able to use some budget funds. So we're just making a little use of it, and you just tighten up to say that I know I have to pay that bill. Where else, do I not have to pay the bill?
I'll add, Mary, that the Finance Committee discussed that at some length, and there was interest on the Finance Committee in budgeting a number that might be more realistic moving forward. Like, let's just say budgeting a 4% increase so that we don't get a shock next year. But the problem we explained was that we're not permitted to do that. When we submit the budget, we have to have, supporting documentation. Like, for example, our position control roster goes to the county. They look into that. We need to have substantiation for whatever our health insurance increase is. So even though it probably in a real, in an other world setting would be more prudent and responsible to budget a trend line number so that you don't get a real slap in the face if the rates shoot up. We really aren't allowed to do that, and the only mechanism to deal with it is the waiver that the DOE would then tell us we qualify for based on what the state employees health benefits plan increases by.
So in addition, do we anticipate now, since we're only being 60% funded by the state, do we anticipate like you said, in the next 5 years, that number is going to go up as well?
Yes, that number should go up.
Do you think we'll ever get close to being 100% funded, or
I'm
we get
skeptical. I'm skeptical about that,
yeah,
but I could see us getting to 75%
80,
or
yeah.
something like that, unless, of course, there's there's another recession or other problem with the state's finances.
Great, thank you.
The other caveat is the additional funding that we should be getting from the state is contingent upon how much money the state puts into the pot to refund all of the districts. There's some funding that comes from what they take away from the 1/3 of the districts that are getting reduced state aid, but then there is also state funds that go into that number as well. So that all depends on the state's ability to contribute.
Starting lawsuits against the state
Exactly.
to make up the funding.
Yeah.
And then there's districts like Lakewood where they just gave them additional $15 million in state aid. So, nothing's a guarantee. That's why, Dr. LaSousa waited until the Tuesday to even give us the numbers, because there's no guarantee. Any additional questions on the budget? We're running right up against 7:30. We'll give the robotics team a minute to set up. Okay, so if you just give us a minute to break, we're going to then spin into the public meeting. If you guys want to come on up and set up if you need to, come on aboard. Very good. 1 second, guys. If you could just part for 1 second, but don't go too far. Mike, we're going to do this robotics demonstration as part of your report. Yes. Okay, if you guys can just stand by. I just did a little bit of bureaucracy first. I'll talk as fast as I can. So if you can, just stand by. So welcome everybody to the public meeting, Open Board of Education meeting, March 18th. In accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meeting Act, Chapter 231, PL 1975, I wish to announce that the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this Act, the School District of the Chatham Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, place thereof posted in the Board Administrative Offices, sent to the clerks of the Chatham Borough of Chatham Township, posted at the Library of the Chathams, the Chatham Courier, the Daily Record, the Star Ledger, and the TAP. One more second. Mr. DeQuillo, could you take attendance?
Here. Ms. Chambers? Here. Ms. Chigarelli? And I know she was here. I'll see if she comes back. Ms. Clark?
Here.
Ms. Kenny?
Here.
Mr. Ryan? Mr. Valenti? And Ms. Weber?
Here.
6. Mr. Valenti is
Mr.
here.
Valenti's here.
7, I'm going to count Ms. Chigarelli. 7 present and accounted for.
Excellent. And if you're able, please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is over by the front door. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just to get right to it, I'm going to forego the President's comments and pass the baton right over to Dr. LaSousa for our presentation.
All right, thank you, Ms. Weber. And I'm going to pass the baton in 1 second to Ms. Julie Ryan. Just really quickly, I'll say that we launched our K-12 Design and Technology program about 5 years ago. One of our first hires was Danielle DeGunis, who's our supervisor. And one of our very next hires, might have even been our next hire, was Julie Ryan, who we stole from West Morris Central High School, where she had been working. And it was a really good decision because we did not have, I don't think we even had a robotics course in the high school at the time. We didn't have teams like we do now and like you see before you. And Miss Ryan, of course, just won an award announced last week or last weekend, the New Jersey First Veteran Educator of the Year Award, statewide. NJ First is the entity that runs the tech challenges across the state and across the country and across the world, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to let Miss Ryan brag about what these guys have been up to and what they've been doing, and they're going to give us a little demo. But I know she's not going to take as much credit as she deserves, but she's just been a phenomenal find for us, and she's a great role model for all of the students she teaches. And I want to congratulate and thank Miss Ryan on all of her accomplishments.
Thank you so much, Dr. LaSousa. And we wanted to first start off by saying thank you to the public, the Board of Education, as well as the administration for allowing us to come here today. As Dr. LaSousa mentioned, the robotics program at the high school is about 4 years old. So the students you see before you are a part of our first Tech Challenge teams, which we started out 4 years ago with just 6 students in the program, 1 team, and immediately the next year bounced to 2 teams with about 17 students in the program. And originally we were very, very male dominated. Our first year we had just 1 female in the program, the next year about 4, and now we actually are an even male to female ratio, which is something I'm very proud of within the program, as these kids are coming up through our fantastic K through 12 STEM program. So these kids before you have been competing all year in a challenge that they'll explain a little bit more in detail. But it's something that kind of surpasses your everyday curricular needs that they do in all of their other classes, because I ask a little bit more from them. Not only are they basically writing papers every day in their engineering notebook, they're learning to truly public speak every weekend at competitions where they're doing judged interviews. They're figuring out how to put together a business plan and how to sustain the program financially outside of all the support we have within the school district, but also how they can purchase new uniforms, new parts throughout the school year. And then also, most importantly, they're trying to figure out how to sustain their program. So outside of just working within the classroom and learning about the robotics on their own, is they want to spread that message and encourage younger members throughout the district to become members of the STEM community as a part of the robotics community. So throughout the fall, they're all heading down to the middle school to help mentor our new middle school robotics team. They're constantly asking me when we're going to get robotics programs at the elementary and Lafayette program, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Because at the end of the day, they spread themselves a little too thin sometimes, so we have to cut them off a little bit. And besides just helping out the younger generations, they also spend quite a bit of time going to senior citizen centers around our community and helping with senior tech help. I believe it's every 2 weeks that you all go, where they're engaging with the seniors in our community and helping them with sending emails to their loved ones, FaceTiming with their loved ones, whatever it might be that they need help with. So it's a huge testament to how much they do, because they're in my classroom, most of their study halls, all of their lunches, and every day that I don't kick them out after school, they're there on the weekends. And then the robotics events are 12 to 13-hour days on a Saturday or Sunday. So it's really incredible that they're able to focus this much time, but then also be incredible students and athletes across the board within everything else they do. So I'm going to pass it off because they're much more engaging and entertaining than I am. But thank you again for letting us be here.
Hi everybody. Okay, so as Ms. Ryan was just talking to you guys about our program growth. Oh yeah, I'm Eliza. I am a junior and I've been part of the program for 3 years now, I believe. Yeah. And so, as Ms. Ryan was saying, our program has really grown a lot throughout the years in terms of our gender ratio and members and team, like the amount of teams we've had. But as the program has grown, we're really proud to say that our robots have been getting better and better, and we've been, getting further in the competitions. We've been able to work together as teams more, and we've really started to learn more about these other skills that we can apply both in the class and outside of the class. And so Jason will talk a little bit more about these skills that we've been able to learn.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Jason, and I'm a junior. This is my second year in the program. And so, like, this program, it teaches, like, a lot more skills than you would think, involving not just coding, CAD, and the mechanical side of things, but also, like, creating a network with outreach and fundraising. And so, like, we try to create a network with our outreach by reaching out to, like, mentors and, like, engineers in the real world, and we try to take their knowledge and funnel it through us into more, like, we also reach out to kindergartens and preschools, and we try to get other kids involved in STEM. And so, also regarding fundraising, we've, like, these robots are pretty darn expensive, and also we have to pay for, like, traveling costs. Like, Worlds is in Detroit, and our fundraising has been able to pay for the whole trip. And so the past 2 years, we've raised over $60,000. And so I'm going to pass it over there to talk about the competition.
Hi, I'm Lee. I'm a senior, and this is my second year in the robotics program. So the game for our competition changes each year. It's always played on a 12 by 12 field of foam tiles, and this year the game is called Rover Ruckus, and this is in the center of the field.
So we have, I'm Amber. I'm a junior. This is my second year in the robotics program. So every meet and competition we go to, each team will play a total of 5 matches. Each match is 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So the first 30 seconds is what we call autonomous, which is pre-programmed. And then the next minute and 30 seconds are driver control, where our drive team controls the robots with game pads. And then the last 30 seconds is end game, so the final 30 seconds of the match.
Okay. So throughout our competition, we can score points by doing like a various amount of things. Oh, by the way, I'm Tessa. I'm a junior. This is my 3rd year. Sorry. So we have these things. Amber, do you want? Oh. Yeah. We have these. They're called particles. We can like pick them up and we can put them in there to score points. We can, if you see, there's like handles there. We can hook our robot onto there and lift completely off of the floor of our robot to score points. There's a bunch of other things that we do on the field throughout the game to score like a various amount of points.
All right. So I'm Jackson. I'm a first-year FTC student, and I'm a sophomore. I'm going to talk, before we get into more about our specific robots and what we've been able to build this year, I'm going to talk a little bit about the basic design process behind making a robot. So a big misconception that I personally get a lot when people come and view our program for the first time is they think there's some kind of instruction manual or kit we follow. We actually just start with parts. So we design our robots completely 100% from scratch, just with the parts that were given and we purchased through our funding. So if you look at our two robots, you'll notice that they're very, very, very different. And that's because the two different teams have taken two very different approaches to actually building the robot and completing the challenges that we have been assigned. And the beauty of this really method of designing two different robot systems is that it allows us to have a more hands-on learning system instead of sitting down and getting a lecture on exactly how to build the perfect robot. We learn a lot through trial and error, and especially as a first-year student myself, I've learned a lot through different mentors and alumni who have returned, and also members like Jason, who has been here longer than I, and he's done a lot of work with me, helping me learn how to really build these mechanisms. So one really very standard mechanism on both of the robots that's very crucial that we always start with is called a drivetrain. So pretty much all a drivetrain is it's the main chassis of the robot. So all these metal beams, basically just this metal cube with wheels, and so that allows us to move. And from there we're actually able to build the different functional mechanisms of the robots in order to make it accomplish those challenges. So I'm going to pass it over to Joydeep, who's going to talk about 11248's robot.
Hi, I'm Joydeep. This is my first year in FTC, and I'm a sophomore. So our robot is essentially composed of three main components. There's the intake, which is connected to gears, and it basically winds this thing called surgical tubing really quickly and basically deposits it into this launcher box. We decided to use a launcher box to basically, yeah, well, and so we've decided to use a launcher box. It essentially takes the minerals and launches them into these things over here. Sick. And then finally, we have the lift, which, as it sounds, lifts up, attaches to this thing right here, and essentially lifts the robot up. Yeah. Yeah. And so it essentially just lifts the robot up and off the ground. And, yeah, and we can also deploy off the launcher as well. Alright, who am I passing the mic to?
Alright, Christian. Hello, my name is Christian Tortelia. I'm a sophomore in high school, and this is my first year in this program. Some parts I would like to highlight are the 3D printed parts of our robot. We created those because sometimes there are certain parts that don't exist in regular robotics, like this hook and this box. Another part I would like to talk about is the arm system we have right here that allows our robot to move this box up and down for collection and dropping purposes.
Two other very important parts. I'm Mike. This is my first year in FTC, and I'm a senior. Two other important parts of the robot, as Christian prefaced, is the collection box. The collection box has two open holes, both at the bottom and the top. It's attached to a rev motor, which allows us to take particles in from the front, and after the arm is moved up, to allow us to push them out of the top. And our version of their lift includes a system called a worm gear, which can only be turned in one direction. So we can hook the robot onto the lander without any worry of it falling. It also, as he also said, uses a custom 3D printed hook to keep itself attached.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so like in FTC, the competition is obviously about the robots, but it's also trying to inspire like the future generation of engineers. So they give awards out for things like motivating the community or connecting with engineers, or simply like encompassing the engineering design process as much as possible. So our team personally, 11248, this year at our league tournament, we won the Connect Award, which is for connecting with obviously engineers, and we also managed to get nominated for the Think Award, which which also we got nominated for Inspire, which encompasses all the things FIRST is about, but Think is also for the engineering design process. And yeah, I think that's it.
Is there a percentage of metal to 3D printed, or is it whatever you all want to design? There's no limitations?
Yeah, it's whatever we want.
Could you pass her the mic, because it won't?
42.
There are weight limit. Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm a senior, and this is my second year in FTC. There are weight limitations. Our robot can't exceed 42 pounds, but so far we've never even come close to that. I believe our robot, 11248, is around 20 pounds, and I don't know what the other. And theirs is even lighter. So we haven't really come close to hitting any of the limitations yet.
And Rachel, one of your teammates mentioned a point system. Are there officials on the floor?
Yeah, there is at least a couple watching. There's also like a head referee, and they're watching the whole time and scoring points as the game goes on. They'll also count them all up at the end to get the final score.
So you don't self-score?
Although we do keep track of our scores, and there have been occasions when referees have gotten things like a little bit wrong or tallied a little bit wrong, and we have people who are very, very eager to say, wait, no, that's not right. We deserve more points than that. So we do keep track of our own scores as well.
Very cool. I think one of your teammates didn't. Did you get an opportunity to introduce yourself?
Oh, no, I didn't. I'm Timothy McAvoy. I'm a sophomore, and this is my second year in the program.
And how are you liking the program so far?
So it's a lot of fun. It's very interesting. You learn a lot in the program in a lot of different sectors.
Who are the seniors on the team? You mind passing the mic back to Rachel? Rachel, is there something on the team that you didn't have this year? Additional staff, and just I know funding is always an issue, but is there something like, oh gosh, I wish we had a Fujiwichi? That's a technical term. You can look it up later.
Very, very technical, yes. I'm not really sure if there are any like mechanical or technical things that we need, but something that would be really nice is to maybe have this class count for honors credit. As Ms. Ryan mentioned, we put a lot of our time into it. Like we spend lunches, we spend after schools, we spend weekends in this, and like the stuff we're asked to do is very like high level stuff, and it would be nice to get honors credit for that, and I think it would really help us out and like be sort of almost a reward for all the hard work that we put in.
And I asked that of a senior because it's never self-serving. The ship is sailed. They're heading off to the next event.
This isn't going to benefit me at all.
Yeah, whatever they say is not going to benefit them. It'll only benefit those behind them. But this is fantastic. Mary?
I just have a quick one. When you said it's a 12 by 12 square that you're in, are you in there alone, or is there another team with you at the same time?
So you're actually playing with another team called an alliance. So normally it's 2 robots versus another 2 robots, but it's randomized. So your alliance in one match could be your opponent in the next. It's mixed up throughout. Yes.
Can't burn any bridges.
When you go out, and I really think it's so awesome that you're going to middle school and to the, do you bring your robots with them and do demonstrations so that they can see all the different components that
one of our favorite things to do with the kids actually is ask who wants to drive, because it really gets them going. And yeah, it is actually. They the night before our state championship, we let them drive and they broke it, so we had to fix it. But I mean, despite the stress, I think personally it was worth the seeing the enjoyment on their faces.
it's amazing. And thank you for
That's true.
And if you don't know where it's going to break, it helps you the next day.
That's true. That's true.
Okay.
Excellent. You want to just, Ms. Ryan can wrap it up?
Sure. Is there one more question?
Could you talk a little bit when you go to the matches, how many rounds you go and how complicated it is on each level? And would you talk a little bit about your engineering notebook too?
So in each qualifier, or yeah, the qualifiers, there's roughly, what did you say, six? Five matches per team. And each one, as they said, it runs through the autonomous, the manual, and the end game, where you're performing various tasks. Each robot usually has its own set of tasks that it can do, and you're looking for strategic partners so you can accomplish the widest array of goals possible to gain the most points.
So also, after the qualification matches, there is a point called Alliance Selection, where the 4 top teams of the day get to go around and select 2 other teams to be on their alliance, in which they compete in semifinals and finals. So it's very important to be, like, at least if you're not one of the top 4 teams, have qualities that make you appealing to be selected by a top team. So maybe you have good synergy with them, or you're good all around. And so that's a very important part of first.
Oh. So you asked a little bit about our engineering notebook. I want to talk about that real briefly. So the engineering notebook, well, we have a big notebook with everything in the business section and all of our design documents and everything. But the engineering notebook in particular is sort of a recipe of day by day how we build everything. So every day that we accomplish something new, even if it's a small little things. For example, if you look on a robot right here, these little green things, one day of our engineering notebook, half of that page was just the designing, the prototyping, the CADing, and the final product of building just that small little thing. So every small little thing goes incredibly in detail into the engineering notebook, and at the end of the year, they're usually easily over 100 pages long. So they're very, very detailed recipes of how we build our robots and how we've gone through our season and learning from our mistakes and learning how to improve our robot. And it's something that judges really like to see pretty much just as much as having an excellent functioning robot.
How is your team organized? Do you have like a lead design person, a coding, and how does that work? How do you allocate the work?
So the way the work is divided, at the start of the season, we all try and do a little bit of everything. We all try a little bit of CAD, we all try a little bit of building, we all try a little bit of coding. And then as the season goes on, we figure out where our strengths lie. Personally, mine are in doing design sketches, which we put in the notebook to illustrate our process. For example, Jackson, he's really good at building. So as the season goes on, we sort ourselves into whatever role we fit best and like where we can best help our team.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you. Again, I mean, that was a fantastic job by a bunch of teenagers in a little bit of a high-stress situation, speaking right now. So great job, everyone. But otherwise, hopefully you can continue to follow us. There's over 250 teams in the New Jersey state alone for high school FTC teams, and only 10 of them move on to compete at the next level of tournaments. So one of our teams is moving on and competing at the World Championship at the end of April. So we're busy planning our trip to Detroit, and hopefully you see some good stuff in the press afterwards. Thank you so much.
ready to, oh, I need Mike. Dr. LaSousa, did you have any additional, whoops, sorry, we're going to continue on with the meeting. Sorry, I just don't want the audio picked up. Connor, are you good? Lotta.
Okay.
Dr. LaSousa, did you have any additional items you'd like to report on? I did just want to mention, the high school team, or the Chatham High School earned the first College Board AP Computer Science Female Diversity Award, which is what Ms. Ryan had mentioned. And that is honored. Those are schools that are honored that have AP Computer Science, and the female population is at least 50%. And just to put it in context, this is a worldwide distinction. There's 18,000 secondary schools in the world, and only 685 of them have been awarded this distinction. So it's a phenomenal honor. And I don't know, those that have followed us for the last 5 or 6 or 7 years, when we asked the public to fund a second question to build out the STEM program, the overarching goal was to ensure, it used to be computer science was, the top 10%. We wanted to flip that paradigm and make it available to the masses and not just the elite. And the high school program, I'm just reading it from an article that was recently published, the high school program since 2013-2014 school year has increased the population of the program 375% in just such an amazingly short period of time. And the program is K-12, but that distinction is just for the high school program. So I just wanted to congratulate the Design and Technology department as a whole. You're good? Nothing else, Dr. LaSousa? Does anybody have any questions for Dr. LaSousa? Is that, Rachel had asked about honors level. Is that something that could be looked into? Is that a possibility? Is there a criteria, amount of time?
All of the above.
Okay. They do put a tremendous amount of time, and that's, if that's the biggest criteria, they should be recognized for their time that they're putting into that course. Very good. Moving on to the business administrator's report, Peter.
Yes, one thing to report regarding the middle school auditorium. It is on the addendum this evening, but I'm asking the board to approve the contract with Billy Constructing to do the referendum renovations. As a result of, if you recall, the last 2 meetings, we've rejected bids. As a result of the architect running the negotiation process, they've been able to create just about the full plan of the renovations by just making some minor alterations and having Billy Contracting being able to award within the budgeted funds. So we're going to do the base bid and one alternative number 7, which is 100% new railings inside at a cost of just slightly over $2.5 million. Which falls into the the budget, and so I'm asking for, that's the update, and that's B11 on the addendum.
For the middle school?
The middle school
auditorium.
renovation for the auditorium.
And, contractors are our favorite thing. Has our architect vetted this contractor? Like, are they big on permits? Yeah. I don't want to pick on our architects, but I don't want to get to the end of the project and they didn't get a permit.
There have been previous workings, and they recommended it and didn't. I believe I know at least once, if not out of the 2 rejected, Billy was the low, and they didn't say, "Oh my goodness, no, we've got to get rid of this contractor." They spoke highly, and we're validating references, so we should be fine.
Okay. And I know the district is protected financially. It's just we lose time.
Yes.
When a company is bankrupt or there's an issue with permits, there's no exposure financially, but the completion date is at risk.
This is one that is an effect, because as the longer the construction takes, that's the longer inconvenience to students. It's an inconvenience to the district, since we operate with 1 auditorium, not 2.
Sure.
One of the ways of lowering the cost was increasing the time frame, so the contractors did not have to plan for double shift work. So they are going to mobilize as of mobilize as of April 1st to do the seat demolition so that the abatement of the floor and some pipe wrapping, the floor and the asbestos in the walls can be abated during spring break so that then the contractor can hit the ground running in May, and start on the construction. And we've extended the timetable where we should have a substantial completion in December and hopefully the auditorium open and running for January.
Okay, excellent. And you already found the oil tank that was hidden there during the STEM building. So
Well, we're not breaking ground, so we shouldn't find anything on the ground.
we didn't expect to find
So
the
that's-
10,000-gallon
No.
heating oil tank either.
No. The only other item I wanted to report, and it's really just from a facility update, is there was a fire at the new Cougar Fieldhouse today. The heating unit, the wiring in the heating unit caught fire. Luckily, the fire alarm was set off. The monitoring company had called the fire department and called the buildings and grounds, who went, and by the time everybody got there, the fire was out. The wires just smoldered and burned themselves, and luckily there was no other combustible material. So I must say that a fire was put out without using any water, which is a very good thing.
Okay.
So the negative is we need to replace the whole heating unit, which we're working on. So right now the building is usable, but just doesn't have heat.
Was it on?
It is on because they're using it to pull the equipment in, or if they're changing now for practice. So the heat was, the heat is always running to keep the building, even if it's an unoccupied
the field
temperature.
house. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was thinking the new.
No, not the snack shack. The field house. The new
Field
field
house.
house. I said new field house, not the older field house. Yeah, the newer of the two field houses. No, the unit is probably at least.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I
would
was
say
thinking
15 years old.
The new
soccer locker.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I have
got it.
called and I have notified. We had some pictures of the unit with the, I'd call it fried control panel. Sent that off to the insurance company to file the claim. So we're now working on prices, to replace. Not sure if that's something we can do internal. Depends on the amount of sheet metal work that's required.
Okay.
Determine whether we need a contractor to assist.
Can
Yes, actually, I was told that there was a little bit of a fire smell, but it was a much improved over the prior smells of the field house.
It probably smells better than it normally does. But.
And that's all I have if there's no other questions.
No other questions for me. How do you end on a high note with the high school smells? Any other questions for Peter? I don't want to insult any football coaches that might be in the audience. Okay, moving along to committee reports. Personnel, Mr. Corelli?
We have not met since our last meeting. We are meeting on April 8th.
Excellent. Ms. Clark for curriculum?
We have not met since our last meeting. We're meeting on the April 24th. Is that right? Okay.
Excellent. And Sal, could you do double duty on finance and then policy?
Sure. So finance, we just had the open finance meeting preceding the general meeting. And there's really nothing to point out that hasn't been pointed out in this meeting.
April 1st.
And then policy has not met. We meet again March 25th.
Liaison reports. I don't have anything other than the borough is still looking into the Class 3 officer. They still have to approve a shared services agreement, which I believe is still in draft mode. Township, Ms. Clark?
The township is moving forward with the Class 3 officer appointment and making progress with hiring.
Excellent. Boosters?
They met, but I wasn't there.
I was not
so I
there
don't know what happened.
either. Performing arts, Sal?
Sure. First thing I want to point out is that the Chatham High School production of Hunchback of Notre Dame. Chatham is the first high school in New Jersey to perform this production. Performances are on, mark your calendars please, April 4th at 6 p.m. and April 5th and 6th at 7:30 in the newly renovated Chatham High School Performing Arts Center. Tickets can be purchased at the door or at chshunchback.brownpapertickets.com. Hopefully I enunciated clearly. As a Chatham High School theater tradition, local senior citizens are invited to attend the final dress rehearsal on Wednesday, April 3rd at 3:30 p.m. at the Performing Arts Center, immediately followed by a complimentary dinner hosted by the Chatham Education Association. Seating for the dress rehearsal is unrestricted. However, dinner reservations are limited to 80. To RSVP to the senior dinner, please call Debbie Haringer at 973-701-8037 or email debbie.haeringer@gmail.com by Wednesday, March 27th. That's all she wrote.
Thank you, Sal. And that'll be posted in the minutes, so you didn't have to write that down if you didn't catch it. Let's see. Boosters. Ms. Kenny, Education Foundation?
Yes, I'd just like to remind everyone that the Casino Royale will be held on April 26th, and tickets are currently on sale at chathamedfoundation.org.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Kenny. Mr. Gilfillan is not here, and PTO District Cabinet?
They met on March 6th. Anything to report, Mike?
Nothing? Okay.
We had a nice discussion.
Right.
I can't remember any. I'm trying to remember what the exact bullet points were.
Okay. April 3rd, they meet again.
We actually the reason I didn't have too many bullet points was that the PTO had invited the Chatham Ed Foundation in for a discussion just about how this Ed Foundation operates, synergies that maybe the Ed Foundation and the PTOs can look to accomplish together, and any other kind of long-range thinking with regard to how these two huge support groups are raising money and helping the district. That was kind of the bulk of the meeting.
Excellent. Very good. And then just to wrap up some liaison items, I just wanted to mention that the women's basketball game, they competed in I believe it's the sectional final for their group in Toms River in this phenomenal stadium. Mr. Corelli and I were both there. They played excellent. It was a fantastic game. They didn't come up with a win, but it was a 2-point game essentially throughout. It was an excellent game, tremendous amount of sportsmanship, and I just received a letter from the opposing team's Board of Education, and she actually wanted to write to tell how impressed she was with our students in attendance and their spirited representation of Chatham. So she didn't have to say anything, but she wanted to compliment our fan base.
Can you give that to Mr. Labrera?
Certainly.
So we can see that we've been complimented.
Yeah. I will give it to him. But I just wanted to mention that. And I just wanted to mention Danielle Dagunas, our design and technology supervisor, invited me to a site visit that she hosted, which, again, she didn't have to. It's not ideal to have, a parent in the audience, and it's certainly not ideal to have a board member in the audience, but, she wanted us to see what she's working on. And a lot of other districts tap her. What are we doing in design and technology? How did she design the middle school program? How did she redesign the entire curriculum K-12 in such a short period of time? And she's in the past spent one-off meetings, and she found that to be inefficient. So what she did is she created this site visit. She had an AM session and a PM session. In both sessions, she had between 25 and 30 other districts, and they range from superintendents to business administrators to teachers to maintenance staff. I mean, brick and mortar folks that are going to be building for other districts. And it was such a dynamic and interactive session, and you could see these people were just hanging on Danielle's every word. And then the staff opened up their classrooms, and they had sessions going on. They had, I think it was 7th grade, they had a session going on in the middle room, which is called the Makerspace Room, which is a lot of imaginative design. Think of what you want. You've got some kids working on a mannequin, some kids working on an architecture, some kids designing a yearbook cover, all happening at the same time. The room next to it, I believe it's purple or green, I forget, but that's the CAD room where they do the designs and the drawings, and after they finish the design and the drawing, then they go into the other room and they actually build it. So the spaces are right next to each other, and the teachers were so generous with their time and their talent, and the students were, eager to show off what they were working on. And these are, strangers walking around, but they were so happy to show their wares. So I just wanted to show our appreciation for allowing us to visit, and also thank her for extending the site visit to other districts so they can learn, not only what she's done good, but she also shared what she would have done differently had she had opportunity. So I thought that was awful generous of her to spend an entire day with about 60 folks from other districts. So, Mike, if you could pass on our thanks to Mr. Gunas on that.
I will, and you're leaving out, Jill, that I guess word travels, but the dean of the STEM Center at Kane University reached out to Danielle to ask her to please participate in a partnership program between Zhejiang province in China and New Jersey, and he has invited her for an all expenses paid conference in Wenzhou, China this June. So she has been speaking with Karen and I about whether she should go ahead and attend this conference, and the purpose would be to share what we're doing at Chatham Middle School in particular with colleagues in Wenzhou, China.
Yeah, I said yes, right?
I said I wanted to go, and then I said if I can't, you can.
I said
go.
only if the board president could go. What a phenomenal recognition.
I have a colleague who attended that day and was extremely impressed with the just the overall presentation, but most of all with the fiscal space and how it was designed and how almost every physical piece of the footprint was being used in some capacity. And so it was wonderful to open that up.
It was great. It was great to see it in action. Great to see the kids. But okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I just want a couple feel-good stories before the crowd dissipates. So I just want to make a motion to pass the minutes of the March 4th, 2009 public and executive session. Peter, who was not everybody? Oh, do we have enough then?
Yes.
Okay. I'll just, all those in favor of passing the March 4th minutes, public and executive session, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
For the record, minutes passed 6-0-1.
Excellent, thank you. We have our first opportunity for public commentary. Hearing of the citizens during the public commentary section of the agenda is an opportunity for any member of the public to be heard about issues which are or are not topics scheduled for the current meeting. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit all to be heard, speakers are asked to limit their comments to a reasonable length of time. Ms. Clark will help me with that. And again, just to remind folks, it's not a back and forth. It's your opportunity to make any comments about what's going on, what you love, what you don't like, anything. Share your opinions. If nothing strikes you this time, there's another opportunity at the end. If something strikes you on the... Oh, there we go, Ed. I knew if I talked long enough, somebody would sit.
I just wanted to slightly correct you. The
Oh.
girls did win the section.
Thank you.
They got to the Group 3 finals. There were only 2 teams left in the whole state when they played.
Wow, Group
So
3
just
final.
so
Thank
know.
you, Ed, for keeping me honest. He kept me honest on the women's. I said they won the states. It was the league, the women's hockey team, but still very cool. I like to embellish with no, especially with the lady sports. Any additional comments? Mr. Heap, are you joining us? Yes, I am. All right, you got to start a little sooner, my friend. If you know you're coming up since 2 weeks ago.
Bill Heap, Chatham Borough, a belated happy St. Patrick's Day to all. I have a random comment, and then I would like to address some comments that were made during the open budget meeting. First random comment is this. I don't know if any of you saw the Wall Street Journal last week in the Metro section. There was a profile on 2 districts on Long Island, Westbury and Jericho. I don't know either town, but the folks in Westbury were really upset that they were only spending $24,000 a pupil, and they were jealous of their neighbors in Jericho who spend an astonishing $38,000 per student. I don't know how smart they are, but they're not twice as smart as we are. And I don't know how long that's sustainable. But we have a bargain, and we ought to work to maintain that bargain. If every one of those kids in Jericho High School, every one of the graduating seniors isn't going to Harvard, somebody ought to be upset. With regard to some of the comments that were made during the open budget meeting, there is this misguided notion that somehow the school district is not participating in the wealth being generated by increases in rising real estate prices and also the advent of possible new ratables. This board made a unilateral decision a couple of years ago to abandon the April vote. You painted yourself into a corner, you constrained yourself, and I think it's pretty rich to go around town complaining about it. If you had maintained the April vote, you could ask for whatever you wanted to. You were only constrained by what the voters were willing to give you. But there were no caps, and presumably you could have proposed budgets that included what you thought to be your fair share of the ratables, whatever that might be in the budget. With regard to the rest of us, we are all sharing in the increase in ratables because those increases are being rationalized and equalized throughout the system. So if somebody wants to buy a house for $2 million and pay $40,000 in property taxes, that's fine with me. It means that my taxes don't go up as much as they might ordinarily go up. So I think you have to be careful because it's misleading to say that you're not sharing in it. If it were really the case, you would think that the township and the borough's portion of the budget would be increasing and your portion would be decreasing, and that's not the case. It's been steady at about 2/3, and actually the school board has been driving all of the tax increases for the last several years. So please consider that.
Thank you, Mr. Heap. Any additional public comments? There's another opportunity at the end. So I'm going to close the public commentary for now. And the only thing I'm going to respond to is the misconception that we painted ourselves into a corner. As we said in the open finance meeting, the board can still go out for a second question. We can still go out for a bond referendum. So if there's things that the board thinks are absolutely necessary, we could still put those out to a vote either in November or any of the other 5 dates that are throughout the year that we're allowed to. So moving along, I lost my agenda. Here it is. We're going to move over to personnel. Ms. Ciccarelli, do you mind?
I'd like to move action items A1 to A15 on the regular agenda for vote. Just want to draw some attention to Mr. Deloach, who is retiring. So sad. We love Mr. Deloach, but he's going on, I'm sure, to bigger and better things and serving our country and the amazing things that he has done over the years. So just want to wish him the best and thank him for his time.
I echo that with Mr. Deloach. Of course, he's an institution in Chatham High School, and there are 2 other retirements. Jim Dunna is on the addendum. We just got that one in. He's a 5th grade math science teacher at Lafayette. He's probably had some of your children. And the single most enthusiastic person in the district is Dorothy Chin, who is a Southern Boulevard school paraprofessional. You may or may not know her, but she's comes to work with more energy than I think any person in the district. So I want to wish all of them well in their retirements.
Excellent. Did somebody second?
Yeah. I'll second.
There we go. Any additional questions on personnel for Ms. Grant or Dr. LaSousa? Beth loves a good question. No, very good. Seeing none. Peter, would you mind?
Sure. Agenda items A1 through A15 with the addenda item for A1 and A15. Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Ms. Chambers?
Yes.
Ms. Ciccarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Valenti?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items passed 7-0.
Excellent. We're going to move on to finance. Ann and Sal, you're the only 2 from finance, right?
Yep.
So Sal, would you mind?
Sure. I'd like to move items B1 through B10 for public vote. Deals primarily with the budget we just discussed. And number 11 on the addendum, which has to do with the contracting that Peter spoke about earlier.
Second.
I just want to make 2 quick notes of donations. There's a Washington Avenue School PTO donation of $370 for the purchase of lawn signs to use for advertisement of upcoming events at school. And we're also accepting a $340 coaching reimbursement donation from the Chatham Athletic Boosters for girls lacrosse and tennis clinics.
Excellent. Thank you. Any questions for the Finance Committee or Peter on any of those items or any additional questions on the budget?
I just need to make one adjustment to the resolution B2. The 3rd paragraph comments about the anticipated enrollment. It should be 4,197 students, which is what I will report to the county, not the 4,176.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And you'll repost the agenda with the new number and the minutes? Okay, thank you. Any additional questions on finance or facilities? No? No, good. Peter?
Agenda items B1 through B10 and B11 off the addendum. Mr. Arnick?
Yes.
Ms. Chambers?
Yes.
Ms. Ciccarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan? I'm sorry, Mr. Valenti? Yes. And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items passed 7-0.
Excellent. Curriculum, Ms. Clark?
I move curriculum items C1 and 2, and there can be no discussion.
Any second? Second by Sal. We have to go through this quickly because we're prohibited from discussing any of that. So all those in favor of passing C1 and C2? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Agenda items passed 7-0.
Excellent. Thank you. Policy, Mr. Arnott?
There's nothing to move, Mrs. Weber.
Okay. No audibles? Nothing. Very good. Okay. So we have our opportunity for board business. I know we covered a lot earlier in finance. Is there anything new or old anybody would like to bring up? No, Sal or Ann? So if the only thing I would like to reiterate is the finance committee maybe coming back to the full board with recommendations on how to fund the trainer. That would be great. And if the administration could look into maybe just providing us the criteria for what qualifies for honors level courses for the robotics. We don't know what's involved, and maybe it's impossible, but if you don't mind just letting us know how that shakes out. Does anybody else have any items they want to talk about? No? Okay, excellent. We have our second opportunity for public commentary. We do have an executive session. No action will be taken. So if the board could stick around, second opportunity for public commentary. Nothing? Going once? Okay. I make a motion then to Luke, did you have something in the back? I saw you moving toward the microphone. All right. Very good. Well, thank you, everybody. I make a motion to close the public session. Thank you, everybody. Drive safely.